The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of Windsor Castle as staff members hurried about their final preparations. Today was the annual Royal Children's Garden Party, a tradition that brought together young members of the royal family with carefully selected guests from across the Commonwealth. The air buzzed with excitement as colorful bunting fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the sweet scent of freshly cut roses filled the atmosphere. Prince Louis, now 6 years old, bounced on his toes as he peered through the tall windows of the castle's east wing. His blonde hair caught the sunlight, and his bright blue eyes sparkled with anticipation. He had been looking forward to this day for weeks, ever since his mother, the Princess of Wales, had told him about all the fun activities planned for the afternoon. "Your Royal Highness," came a familiar voice behind him. Louis turned to see Officer James Mitchell, his favorite protection officer, approaching with a warm smile. James had been part of Louis's security detail for over 2 years now, and the young prince had grown quite fond of the tall, broad-shouldered man with kind brown eyes and an easy laugh. "James!" Louis exclaimed, rushing toward his protector. "Is it time yet? Can we go outside now?" James chuckled, kneeling down to Louis's eye level. "Almost, Your Highness. Your mother wants to see you first to make sure you're properly dressed for the occasion." Louis looked down at his smart navy blazer, crisp white shirt, and perfectly pressed shorts. "I think I look quite good already," he said with the confidence only a 6-year-old could possess. "You certainly do," James agreed. "But you know how important these events are to your family. There will be many important people here today, including some distant relatives you haven't met before." As they walked through the castle's ornate corridors, Louis chattered excitedly about the pony rides, the magic show, and the elaborate tea service that had been planned. James listened patiently, his trained eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Even within the supposedly secure walls of Windsor Castle, his job was to remain vigilant. They found the Princess of Wales in the blue drawing room, speaking quietly with several members of the royal household staff. She looked elegant in a flowing summer dress of pale yellow, her hair styled in gentle waves. When she saw Louis approach, her face lit up with maternal pride. "There's my handsome prince," she said, opening her arms for a hug. Louis ran to her eagerly, and she held him close for a moment before stepping back to examine his appearance. "Perfect," she declared, smoothing down a stubborn cowlick in his hair. "Now, Louis, I want you to remember what we've discussed about today. This is an important event, and there will be many people here who are very excited to meet you." Louis nodded solemnly. Despite his young age, he had already learned to understand the weight of his royal status. "I'll be good, Mama. I promise." "I know you will, darling. James will be with you the entire time, and if you need anything at all, you just let him know." She turned to address the protection officer. "The guest list has been thoroughly vetted, but please keep an especially close eye on him during the meet and greet portion." "Of course, Your Royal Highness," James replied formally, though his tone remained warm. As they made their way toward the gardens, Louis could hear the sounds of preparation growing louder. Staff members called out instructions to each other, musicians tuned their instruments, and the distant whinny of ponies suggested that the entertainment was nearly ready. The castle's head of security, Commander Sarah Phillips, intercepted them just before they reached the garden doors. She was a stern woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, but Louis had always found her to be kind despite her serious demeanor. "Your Royal Highness," she said, nodding to the Princess of Wales before turning to Louis. "Prince Louis, I hope you have a wonderful time today. Officer Mitchell and I have reviewed all the security arrangements and everything is in order." Louis looked between the two adults, sensing an undercurrent of something he couldn't quite understand. "Is something wrong?" he asked innocently. "Not at all, sweetheart," his mother assured him quickly. "Commander Phillips just wants to make sure everyone has a lovely, safe time at the party." The Princess of Wales exchanged a meaningful look with both security officers. Earlier that morning, they had received intelligence about several uninvited guests who had been attempting to gain access to royal events. While none of the threats appeared to be serious, the security team had decided to implement additional precautions. "Shall we?" the princess asked, gesturing toward the garden doors. The transformation of the castle grounds was truly spectacular. What had been simple lawns and flower beds that morning had been converted into a wonderland of activity stations. Colorful tents dotted the landscape, each hosting a different entertainment option. A carousel played cheerful music near the rose garden, while a small circus ring had been set up for acrobatic performances. Louis's eyes grew wide as he took in the scene. Children of various ages, all dressed in their finest clothes, were already enjoying the festivities under the watchful eyes of their guardians and security personnel. The air filled with laughter and excited chatter. "Can I go on the carousel first?" Louis asked eagerly. "Let's say hello to some of the guests first," his mother suggested gently. "Then you can enjoy all the activities." They approached a receiving line that had formed near the main entrance to the garden area. Louis recognized some of the faces, children of diplomats and Commonwealth officials whom he had met at previous events. Others were complete strangers, but all seemed genuinely thrilled to meet him. James positioned himself slightly behind and to the right of Louis, his standard protective stance. From this position, he could monitor the crowd while remaining unobtrusive. His earpiece crackled occasionally with updates from other members of the security team positioned throughout the grounds. "Prince Louis," came an excited voice. A girl about his own age approached with her parents, curtsying politely as she had clearly been taught. "I'm Sophie. My daddy works at the embassy in Australia." Louis smiled warmly and extended his hand for a handshake, just as his parents had taught him. "It's very nice to meet you, Sophie. Have you been to the pony rides yet?" As the children chatted, James noticed a commotion near one of the entrance gates. His earpiece buzzed with a message from gate security about someone attempting to enter without proper credentials. He frowned slightly but didn't want to alarm Louis unnecessarily. The receiving line continued for nearly an hour, with Louis meeting dozens of children and their families. He handled each interaction with remarkable poise for someone so young, asking thoughtful questions and showing genuine interest in each person he met. His mother watched proudly from nearby, occasionally offering gentle guidance. "Your Royal Highness," James said quietly during a brief lull in the line, "perhaps it's time for that carousel ride?" Louis's face lit up immediately. "Oh yes. May I, Mama?" "Of course, darling. Just stay close to James and don't wander off on your own." As they made their way toward the carousel, James's trained eye continued to scan the crowd. The garden party was proceeding smoothly, with no obvious security concerns. Children laughed and played while their parents socialized in the elegant outdoor setting. Everything appeared to be exactly as it should be. The carousel was a magnificent antique piece, painted in vibrant colors with hand-carved horses that bobbed up and down to the rhythm of traditional carnival music. Louis chose a white horse with a flowing mane and climbed aboard with James's assistance. "This one's name is Thunder," Louis announced confidently, patting the carved horse's neck. "How do you know that?" James asked, amused. "He told me," Louis replied matter-of-factly, as if speaking with carousel horses was the most natural thing in the world. As the carousel began to turn, Louis waved enthusiastically at his mother and the other guests who had gathered to watch. The afternoon sun warmed his face, and for a moment he felt like any other child enjoying a perfect day at a fair. James walked alongside the carousel, maintaining his protective position while allowing Louis to enjoy the experience. The rotating motion gave him an excellent view of the entire garden area, and he used the opportunity to conduct another visual sweep of the crowd. Everything seemed normal until his earpiece crackled with an urgent message from Commander Phillips. "Mitchell, we have a situation developing near the tea pavilion. Unidentified individual claiming to be family. Requesting immediate assistance with verification." James's expression grew serious as he processed the information. He had to make a quick decision about whether to interrupt Louis's ride or wait for more details. The carousel had only just begun its cycle, and pulling the prince away immediately might cause unnecessary alarm. "Copy that," he responded quietly into his microphone. "Prince Louis is secure on the carousel. ETA to your position in approximately 3 minutes." As the carousel continued its gentle revolution, James found himself studying the crowd with renewed intensity. His years of training had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about this situation felt different from the typical party crashers who occasionally tried to gain access to royal events. Louis, oblivious to the developing situation, continued to enjoy his ride on Thunder. He waved at every familiar face he spotted in the crowd and called out greetings to children he had just met. His joy was infectious, and many of the guests found themselves smiling and waving back at the charming young prince. "Look, James!" Louis pointed toward a group of performers setting up for what appeared to be a juggling act. They have so many colorful balls. I see them, Your Highness. James replied, though his attention was divided between Louis's enthusiasm and the ongoing security situation. The carousel began to slow as its cycle came to an end. James moved closer to help Louis dismount, while simultaneously trying to get a visual on the T-pavilion where Commander Phillips was handling the unidentified individual. Can I ride again? Louis asked hopefully as James lifted him down from thunder. Perhaps in a little while, James said diplomatically. I think your mother might like to see you try some of the other activities first. As they walked away from the carousel, James noticed that the crowd seemed to be shifting toward the center of the garden. The Princess of Wales was nowhere to be seen, which was unusual given her habit of keeping Louis within her sight during public events. His earpiece crackled again. All units. Be advised, subject claiming to be Queen Camilla's distant relative. Documentation appears to be fraudulent. Subject is becoming increasingly agitated about meeting Prince Louis specifically. James felt a cold chill run down his spine. In his experience, when someone specifically targeted one member of the royal family while using questionable identification, it rarely ended well. He gently placed his hand on Louis's shoulder, subtly steering him toward a more secure area of the garden. Your Royal Highness, he said carefully, I think it might be a good time to find your mother. She wanted to show you the magic show that's about to begin. Louis looked up at him with those bright blue eyes, and James could see a flicker of concern cross the child's face. Despite his young age, Louis had developed an intuitive ability to read the moods of the adults around him. Is everything all right, James? Louis asked quietly. Before James could respond, a commotion erupted near the main pavilion. Raised voices carried across the garden, and several guests turned their heads toward the disturbance. James's protective instincts kicked into high gear as he quickly assessed their options for moving Louis to a more secure location. Come along, Your Highness, he said with forced casualness. Let's go find that magic show your mother mentioned. But as they began to walk, James spotted something that made his blood run cold. A figure was moving purposefully through the crowd toward them, pushing past other guests with determined urgency. Even from a distance, James could see the wild look in the person's eyes and the way other guests instinctively moved aside. His earpiece exploded with chatter. Subject has left the pavilion area. All units converge on the main garden. Prince Louis is the apparent target. James's training took over completely. In one smooth motion, he scooped Louis up into his arms and began moving rapidly toward the castle's rear entrance, which would provide the quickest access to secure areas within the building. James, what's happening? Louis asked, his voice rising with concern as he sensed the sudden change in atmosphere. Just a precaution, Your Highness, James said, trying to keep his voice calm while his eyes scanned for the fastest route to safety. We're going to play a quick game of hide-and-seek with your mother. Behind them, the figure in the crowd had broken into a run, shouting something that James couldn't quite make out over the general noise of the garden party. Other security officers were converging on the area, but the suspect's head start and the crowded conditions were making apprehension difficult. As James carried Louis toward the castle, he could feel the young prince's body tensing with fear. Despite his attempt to frame the situation as a game, Louis was clearly aware that something serious was happening. I want my mama, Louis said, his voice small and frightened. We're going to find her right now. James assured him, though he had no idea where the Princess of Wales had gone or whether she was even aware of the developing situation. The castle entrance loomed ahead, with several armed guards positioned at the doorway. James felt a moment of relief as he realized they were only seconds away from reaching the secure interior of the building. But that relief was short-lived as his earpiece crackled with the most chilling message yet. Subject has broken through the perimeter. Repeat, subject has broken through the perimeter and is in direct pursuit of Prince Louis and Officer Mitchell. James didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. Every second counted now, and his only focus was getting Louis to safety. The heavy wooden doors of the castle grew larger as he approached, and he could see the guards moving to assist him. Open the doors, he shouted as he ran. Security breach! Secure the prince! The massive doors swung open just as James reached them, and he rushed inside with Louis still in his arms. The sudden transition from bright sunlight to the dimmer interior of the castle momentarily disoriented him, but his training kept him moving toward the predetermined safe room. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder as security personnel worked to contain the situation. James could hear Commander Phillips's voice over the radio, coordinating the response and ensuring that all other members of the royal family were accounted for and secure. As they reached the reinforced door of the safe room, James finally set Louis down, though he kept a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. Louis looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, tears beginning to form. "James, I'm scared," Louis whispered. "I know you are, Your Highness," James replied, kneeling down to Louis's level. "But you're safe now. I promise I won't let anything happen to you." The heavy door closed behind them with a reassuring thud, and James activated the secure communication system to report their status. Within minutes, he knew, the situation outside would be resolved and Louis would be reunited with his parents. But for now, in the quiet safety of the secure room, James focused entirely on comforting the frightened child in his care, knowing that this day had changed everything. The secure room deep within Windsor Castle felt like a different world compared to the chaos that had erupted outside. Heavy stone walls that had protected royalty for centuries now sheltered Prince Louis and Officer James Mitchell from the immediate danger. The room was equipped with modern security technology hidden behind traditional royal furnishings, making it feel more like a comfortable sitting room than a panic room. Louis sat on a velvet-covered chair that was far too large for his small frame, his legs dangling as he tried to process what had just happened. His careful appearance from the morning was now disheveled, his blonde hair tousled from the rapid evacuation, and his navy blazer wrinkled from being carried. Despite his royal upbringing and the poise he had shown earlier, he was still just a 6-year-old boy who had been suddenly torn away from what should have been a perfect afternoon. James stood near the reinforced door, his ear pressed to his communication device as he received updates from the security team outside. His usually calm demeanor showed signs of strain, though he worked hard to maintain his composure in front of Louis. The protection officer's training had prepared him for exactly this type of situation, but the reality of having a frightened child under his care while an active threat remained at large was something that no amount of training could make routine. "James," Louis said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "why did we have to run away? Did I do something wrong?" The question hit James like a physical blow. In the months he had been protecting Louis, he had grown genuinely fond of the bright, curious boy. The idea that Louis might blame himself for the frightening situation was heartbreaking. "No, Your Royal Highness," James said firmly, moving away from the door to kneel in front of Louise's chair. "You didn't do anything wrong at all. Sometimes there are people who don't understand proper behavior at royal events, and we have to take special precautions to keep everyone safe." Louis's blue eyes searched James's face, looking for reassurance. "Will Mama be worried about me?" "Your mother knows that you're safe with me," James replied, though he honestly wasn't sure whether the Princess of Wales had been informed of their location yet. The security protocols were designed to prioritize immediate safety over communication, which meant that Louis's parents might still be unaware of the specific threat that had emerged. James's earpiece crackled with an update from Commander Phillips. "Mitchell, the suspect, has been contained but not yet apprehended. Individual appears to have specific fixation on Prince Louis, requesting extended secure protocol until threat assessment is complete." The news that the person was still at large sent a chill through James. Extended secure protocol meant they would need to remain in the safe room for an indefinite period, potentially hours. He looked at Louis, who was watching him carefully, clearly trying to understand the conversation he was overhearing. "Are we going to stay here for a long time?" Louis asked. James made a decision to be as honest as appropriate with the young prince. "We might need to stay here for a little while longer, until the security team makes sure everyone outside is safe. But I have some things here that might help us pass the time." The safe room had been equipped with various items specifically designed to keep royal family members comfortable during extended stays. James opened a cabinet to reveal books, puzzles, art supplies, and even some electronic games. There was also a small refrigerator stocked with drinks and snacks that would appeal to children. Louis's eyes lit up slightly at the sight of the entertainment options, though his enthusiasm was clearly dampened by the circumstances. "Could we read a story?" he asked hopefully. "Of course," James replied, genuinely pleased that Louis was thinking about normal, comforting activities. "What kind of story would you like?" As Louis browsed through the selection of books, James used the opportunity to check in with the security team again. Through his earpiece, he could hear the controlled chaos of the ongoing operation outside. Multiple agencies were now involved in the response, including local police, the Royal Protection Unit, and intelligence officers who were working to determine whether this was an isolated incident or part of a larger threat. The individual who had pursued them, James learned, had indeed been claiming to be a distant relative of Queen Camilla. Investigation into this claim was ongoing, but preliminary checks suggested that the identification documents presented were sophisticated forgeries. More concerning was the person's apparent obsession with Prince Louis specifically, as evidenced by detailed knowledge about the young prince's schedule and preferences that should not have been available to the general public. "I like this one," Louis announced, holding up a beautifully illustrated book about a young knight who goes on a quest to help his kingdom. "It has pictures of castles like this one." James settled into a chair next to Louis, grateful for the distraction that reading would provide for both of them. As he opened the book and began reading in a soothing voice, he noticed that Louis gradually began to relax. The familiar rhythm of storytelling seemed to calm the boy's nerves, even in their unusual surroundings. The brave young knight knew that his castle was the safest place in all the land. James read, the irony of the words not lost on him given their current situation. Within its strong walls, he could plan his next adventure and rest before facing any challenges that might await him. Louis leaned against James's arm as the story progressed, finding comfort in the physical closeness to his protector. Despite the formal nature of their relationship, a genuine bond had developed between them over the past 2 years. James had been present for countless moments in Louis's life, from ordinary days at the palace to major royal events, and the young prince had come to trust him completely. Meanwhile, outside the safe room, the investigation was revealing disturbing details about their pursuer. Commander Phillips was coordinating with intelligence analysts who were discovering an extensive social media presence filled with posts about the royal family, particularly focusing on Prince Louis. The individual appeared to have been planning this encounter for weeks, possibly months, studying the family's public schedule and looking for the right opportunity to make contact. The person's claim of being related to Queen Camilla was becoming more sinister as details emerged. Rather than a simple case of mistaken identity or wishful thinking, it appeared to be a carefully constructed lie designed to gain access to the royal family. The sophistication of the forged documents suggested either significant resources or assistance from others with expertise in document fraud. "James," Louis said during a pause in the story, "do you think the person who was chasing us is angry with me?" The question revealed how much Louis had understood about the situation, despite James's attempts to minimize the threat. Children, James reflected, were often more perceptive than adults gave them credit for. "I don't think this person is really angry with you, Your Royal Highness," James said carefully. "Sometimes people become confused about appropriate ways to meet members of the royal family. This person probably just wanted to meet you very much but didn't understand the proper way to do it." Louis considered this explanation thoughtfully. "Like when children at school get excited and forget to raise their hands before speaking?" "Something like that," James agreed, though he knew the comparison dramatically understated the seriousness of the situation. His earpiece delivered another update. The suspect had been successfully detained, but not before attempting to scale a fence to reach the castle grounds. This escalation confirmed that they were dealing with someone whose fixation on Prince Louis went beyond normal royal enthusiasm. James felt a wave of relief at the news that the immediate threat had been neutralized, but he knew that protocol would still require them to remain secure until a complete threat assessment could be conducted. There could be accomplices, or this could be part of a larger conspiracy that hadn't yet been uncovered. "Are you hungry, Your Royal Highness?" James asked, thinking that a snack might help Louis feel more normal. "A little bit," Louis admitted. "Will we have proper tea or just snacks?" Even in their current circumstances, Louis's royal upbringing showed through. Proper afternoon tea was such an ingrained part of his routine that he naturally expected it even in a secure room. James opened the small refrigerator and found it well stocked with child-friendly options. There were juice boxes, small sandwiches cut into neat triangles, fruit cups, and even some chocolate biscuits. Someone had clearly put thought into ensuring that young royals would be comfortable during extended stays. "We can have our own private tea party," James suggested, setting out the food on a small table. "Just the two of us." Louis's face brightened considerably at this prospect. "Can we pretend we're having tea with the knight from the story?" Absolutely, James replied, grateful that Lewis's imagination was helping him cope with their confinement. What do you think a knight would drink at tea time? As they shared their impromptu meal, Lewis chattered about the story they had been reading and began creating elaborate adventures for the knight character. His natural resilience was remarkable, and James found himself genuinely enjoying their conversation despite the serious circumstances that had brought them together in the safe room. The communication from outside gradually became more positive as the security team confirmed that the suspect was in custody and that no additional threats had been identified. The garden party had been suspended, and all guests had been safely evacuated from the castle grounds. The other members of the royal family had been accounted for and secured in their respective locations. James, Lewis said during a lull in their conversation, "When we get out of here, will things go back to normal?" It was a profound question from such a young child, and James realized that Louis understood that this incident would likely change aspects of his daily life. Royal protection would almost certainly be increased, and future public events would involve additional security measures. "Things will go back to normal in all the important ways," James assured him. "You'll still live in the same places, see the same people, and do the same activities you enjoy. But we might need to be a little more careful about some things, just to make sure everyone stays safe." Lewis nodded solemnly, accepting this explanation with the remarkable adaptability that children often display. "Will you still be my protection officer? As long as you want me to be, and as long as your parents approve, I'll be here," James promised. This seemed to satisfy Louis, who returned to his storytelling about the adventures of their imaginary knight friend. James marveled at the child's ability to find joy and creativity even in their current situation. It was a reminder of why protecting the royal family was more than just a job for him. These were real people with hopes, fears, and dreams, not just symbols or public figures. As the afternoon wore on, James received word that the Princess of Wales was requesting immediate contact with Louis. The secure room's communication system allowed for encrypted video calls, and within minutes, Louis was able to see his mother's worried but relieved face on a screen. "My darling boy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you all right? James has been taking good care of you?" "Yes, Mama," Louis replied, his own voice becoming slightly tearful at the sight of his mother. "James read me a story about a knight and we had a tea party. But I want to come home now." "Very soon, sweetheart," she promised. "The security team just needs to make sure everything is completely safe first. Daddy and I love you very much, and we're so proud of how brave you've been." After the call ended, Louis seemed more settled but also more aware of how much the afternoon's events had affected his family. He asked fewer questions and spent more time quietly thinking, occasionally looking toward the door as if hoping it would open soon. James continued to monitor the security communications, learning more about the investigation with each update. The suspect's background was revealing a pattern of increasing obsession with the royal family over recent months, including attempts to attend other royal events and efforts to contact palace staff through various channels. The sophisticated nature of the forged identification documents was particularly troubling to security officials. It suggested either significant personal resources or connections to criminal networks with expertise in document fraud. Intelligence agencies were expanding their investigation to determine whether this was an isolated incident or part of a broader security concern. As evening approached, James finally received the welcome news that they were cleared to leave the secure room. The suspect had been fully processed and charged. The castle grounds had been thoroughly swept for any additional security concerns, and enhanced protocols were now in place for Lewis's continued protection. "Your Royal Highness," James announced, "I think it's time for us to go find your family." Lewis jumped up from his chair with renewed energy, though James noticed he stayed close to his protector's side as they prepared to leave their temporary sanctuary. The afternoon that had begun with so much promise had become something else entirely. But both Louis and James had discovered new depths to their relationship during their time together in the safe room. The great oak door of the safe room opened with a heavy creak that seemed to echo through the ancient stone corridors of Windsor Castle. Prince Louis stepped out hesitantly, staying close to Officer James Mitchell's protective presence. The familiar castle hallways looked different now, somehow more serious and formal than they had that morning. Armed security personnel stood at regular intervals, their presence a stark reminder that the afternoon's events had fundamentally changed the atmosphere within the royal residence. Lewis's small hand found James's larger one as they walked through the corridors toward the family's private apartments. The young prince's eyes darted around, taking in the increased security measures that had been implemented during their time in the safe room. Additional guards, new communication equipment, and unfamiliar faces in dark suits all contributed to an environment that felt more like a fortress than a home. "There are a lot more people here now," Louis observed quietly, his voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Yes, Your Royal Highness," James replied, adjusting his pace to match Lewis's shorter steps. "When something unusual happens, the security team brings in extra help to make sure everyone stays safe. It's just a precaution." As they made their way through the castle, James's earpiece continued to provide updates about the ongoing investigation. The suspect, who had been identified as Marcus Caldwell, a 34-year-old man with no known criminal history, was revealing increasingly disturbing details about his obsession with Prince Louis. During initial questioning, he had provided an elaborate story about being a distant cousin of Queen Camilla, complete with fabricated family trees and forged genealogical documents. Commander Sarah Phillips met them at the entrance to the royal family's private wing. Her stern expression softened slightly by relief at seeing Louis safe and unharmed. Behind her stood several other security officials whom James didn't immediately recognize, suggesting that this incident had drawn attention from the highest levels of royal protection services. "Prince Louis," Commander Phillips said formally, though her tone was gentler than usual. "Your parents are waiting for you in the blue room. They've been very concerned about you." Louis looked up at James uncertainly. "Will you come with me?" "Of course," James assured him, understanding that the afternoon's events had made the young prince reluctant to be separated from his primary protector. The blue room had been transformed into an informal command center, with several additional security personnel present alongside the Prince and Princess of Wales. Lewis's parents rose immediately as he entered, and the formal atmosphere dissolved as his mother rushed to embrace him. The Princess of Wales dropped to her knees and pulled Louis into a fierce hug, her composed royal demeanor giving way to pure maternal relief. "My brave boy," she whispered, holding him tightly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Are you hurt? Are you all right?" Louis nodded against his mother's shoulder, though James could see that the boy was fighting back tears. The emotional reunion after hours of uncertainty was overwhelming for everyone involved. The Prince of Wales approached and placed a gentle hand on his son's back, his own relief evident in his expression. "James took very good care of me," Louis said, looking back toward his protection officer. "We read stories and had tea, and he made me feel safe." The Prince of Wales extended his hand to James with genuine gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. But the weight of emotion in those two words conveyed far more than any elaborate speech could have. "It's my honor, Your Royal Highness," James replied, though he felt somewhat uncomfortable being the focus of attention when he was simply doing his job. Commander Phillips cleared her throat diplomatically, drawing attention to the more serious matters that needed to be addressed. "If I may, Your Royal Highnesses, we have some preliminary findings from the investigation that we should discuss." The adults in the room exchanged glances, clearly aware that sensitive information was about to be shared in Louise's presence. The Princess of Wales seemed torn between her desire to protect her son from disturbing details and her need to understand the threat that had materialized at what should have been a safe, family-friendly event. "Louis, darling," she said gently, "perhaps you'd like to go wash up and change your clothes? This has been quite an adventure for you." Louis looked uncertainly between his parents and the security officials. Despite his young age, he was perceptive enough to understand that the adults wanted to discuss things that they didn't think he should hear. "Can James come with me?" Louis asked, still reluctant to be separated from his protector. "I think James needs to stay here for a few minutes to help us understand what happened," his father explained kindly. "But Mrs. Henderson is waiting outside to help you get cleaned up, and James will come find you very soon." Mrs. Daughter watched. Henderson, Lewis's longtime nanny, appeared at the doorway with a reassuring smile. Despite the unusual circumstances, her presence represented normalcy and comfort to Louis. After another quick hug from his parents and a reassuring nod from James, Louis allowed himself to be led away to his private apartments. Once Louis was out of earshot, Commander Phillips's demeanor became notably more serious. She opened a thick folder containing preliminary reports about Marcus Caldwell and the investigation into his background and motivations. "The situation is more complex than we initially realized," she began. "Mr. Caldwell appears to have been planning this approach for several months. We've found extensive documentation in his residence, including detailed schedules of royal family activities, photographs of Prince Louis taken at public events, and what can only be described as shrine-like displays." The Princess of Wales visibly paled at this information. Shrine-like displays? Photographs, newspaper clippings, and what appear to be personal items that he claimed belonged to various royal family members. Most concerning are detailed plans for gaining access to Prince Louis specifically, including multiple scenarios for different types of royal events. James felt a chill as he listened to these details. During the pursuit and their time in the safe room, he had assumed they were dealing with an opportunistic individual who had acted impulsively. Learning that this had been a calculated long-term plan made the afternoon's events far more sinister. How did he obtain accurate schedule information? The Prince of Wales asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "That's still under investigation," Commander Phillips replied. "The level of detail he possessed suggests either a security breach or assistance from someone with legitimate access to palace schedules. We're conducting a comprehensive review of all personnel with access to royal family calendars." The implications of this statement hung heavy in the room. The possibility that someone within their trusted circle might have provided information to a potential threat was deeply disturbing to everyone present. "What about his claim to be related to Queen Camilla?" the princess asked. "Completely fabricated," Phillips confirmed. "The documents he presented were sophisticated forgeries, but our genealogical experts have confirmed that no such family connection exists. More troubling is that he seemed to genuinely believe his own story. During questioning, he appeared genuinely surprised when told that his documentation was fraudulent. This detail added a new dimension to the threat assessment. If Caldwell genuinely believed he was entitled to access the royal family based on fabricated family connections, it suggested a level of delusion that could make him unpredictable and potentially dangerous. James listened to these revelations with growing concern for Louis's long-term safety. "What's his current status?" he asked. "In custody and undergoing psychological evaluation," Phillips replied. "Initial assessment suggests possible delusional disorder, but we're waiting for comprehensive psychiatric evaluation. Given the premeditated nature of his actions and the sophistication of his planning, he's being held without bail pending further investigation." The security implications extended far beyond just this single incident. If Caldwell had been planning his approach for months and had obtained detailed information about royal schedules, there was a possibility that he had shared this information with others or that additional threats might emerge. "We're implementing enhanced security protocols for all upcoming royal engagements," Phillips continued. "This includes expanded background checks for event attendees, additional security personnel at public events, and revised procedures for managing public access to royal family members." The Princess of Wales looked troubled by these developments. "We can't let one disturbed individual force us to completely isolate our children from normal experiences. Public engagements are an important part of their education and their future roles." "We understand that concern, Your Royal Highness," Phillips assured her. "We're working to balance security requirements with the need to maintain normal activities. However, there will need to be some adjustments, particularly for Prince Louis, given that he appears to have been specifically targeted." James found himself thinking about Louis's question in the safe room about whether things would return to normal. The answer was becoming clearer. While Louis's daily life would remain largely unchanged, the underlying security environment would be significantly different. "What about the garden party guests?" the Prince of Wales asked. "Were any of them involved or at risk?" "All guests have been cleared," Phillips reported. "The event was suspended, and everyone was safely evacuated. We've conducted follow-up interviews with several attendees who had interactions with Caldwell before the situation escalated. He appears to have been asking specific questions about Prince Louis's schedule for the afternoon." This information painted a picture of someone who had used the garden party not just as an opportunity to approach Louis, but as a reconnaissance mission to gather real-time information about the prince's activities and location. "We need to brief Prince Louis appropriately about the changes that will be necessary," the princess said thoughtfully. "He's already asking perceptive questions about what happened today." James nodded in agreement. "He's remarkably resilient but he's also very aware of changes in his environment. During our time in the safe room, he asked several times whether things would go back to normal. "What did you tell him?" his father asked. "I tried to be honest without being frightening," James replied. "I told him that the important things would stay the same, but that we might need to be a little more careful about some activities." Phillips consulted her notes again. "We're recommending several specific changes to Prince Louis's security protocols. These include expanded advance teams for any public events, modified procedures for meet and greets with unknown individuals, and enhanced background screening for anyone requesting specific access to Prince Louis." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Mrs. B. Henderson appeared with the news that Louis had finished washing up and was asking when he could see his parents again. The serious security discussion had taken longer than anticipated, and it was clear that the young prince was becoming anxious about the extended separation. "We should continue this discussion later," the princess decided. "Louis has been through enough stress for one day, and he needs reassurance and normalcy now." As the security officials prepared to leave, James realized that his role in Louis's protection was about to become significantly more complex. The casual, friendly relationship they had developed over the past 2 years would need to be balanced with heightened security awareness and new protocols designed to prevent any recurrence of the afternoon's events. "Officer Mitchell," Commander Phillips said as the others were leaving, "I'd like to schedule a detailed debriefing session with you tomorrow morning. Your observations during the incident and your assessment of Prince Louis's response will be valuable for our ongoing security planning." James nodded his understanding, though he found himself hoping that the enhanced security measures wouldn't fundamentally change his relationship with Louis. The trust and friendship they had built was an important part of what made his protection effective, and he worried that excessive formality or restrictions might damage that bond. As the security officials departed, James accompanied the royal family to Louis's private sitting room, where the young prince was waiting with obvious relief for their return. The afternoon that had begun with such promise had revealed new vulnerabilities and threats, but it had also demonstrated the strength of the bonds between Louis and those responsible for his safety. The following morning brought an unseasonable chill to Windsor Castle, with gray clouds gathering over the ancient stones as if reflecting the somber mood that had settled over the royal residence. Officer James Mitchell arrived early for his debriefing session with Commander Phillips, his mind still processing the events of the previous day. The familiar corridors seemed different now, charged with an undercurrent of tension that hadn't existed before the garden party incident. Commander Phillips had set up a comprehensive review session in one of the castle's secure conference rooms, complete with video recordings from the security cameras, transcripts of radio communications, and preliminary psychological evaluation reports about Marcus Caldwell. The room felt more like a criminal investigation headquarters than a space within a royal residence. "Officer Mitchell," Phillips began as James took his seat at the polished mahogany table, "I want to start by commending you for your quick thinking and professional response yesterday. Your actions likely prevented a much more serious incident." James nodded his acknowledgement, though he felt uncomfortable with praise when the situation had revealed such significant vulnerabilities in their security procedures. "Thank you, ma'am. I was just following protocol." "Actually, you went beyond protocol in several important ways," Phillips corrected, consulting her notes. "Your decision to move Prince Louis to the secure room before receiving explicit authorization was exactly the right call. The situation was developing too rapidly for standard communication procedures." She activated a large monitor that displayed a timeline of the previous day's events, with security camera footage synchronized to radio communications and incident reports. James watched himself carrying Louis toward the castle entrance, noting how quickly the situation had escalated from a routine garden party to a full security emergency. "What I want to understand better," Phillips continued, "is your assessment of Prince Louis's psychological state during the incident. How did he process what was happening, and how might that inform our future security procedures?" James considered the question carefully. His relationship with Louis had given him insights into the young prince's personality and coping mechanisms that might not be apparent to other security personnel. Quote, "He's remarkably perceptive for his age," James began. "Even when I tried to frame the evacuation as a game, he understood that something serious was happening. His questions were very direct. He wanted to know if he had done something wrong, if his mother would be worried, and whether things would return to normal." Phillips made notes as James spoke. "Did you observe any signs of lasting trauma or anxiety?" Nothing that seemed pathological, James replied thoughtfully. He was frightened, certainly, but he also showed remarkable resilience. What concerned me most was his tendency to blame himself initially. He seemed to think that he might have somehow caused the problem. This observation prompted Phillips to make additional notes. The psychological well-being of the young prince was a crucial consideration in planning future security measures. Too much obvious protection could create anxiety, while too little might leave him vulnerable. "Let's review the timeline more carefully," Phillips said, advancing the video display. "At what point did you first sense that something was wrong?" James studied the footage, seeing himself walking alongside the carousel, while maintaining his protective position. The first radio communication about an unidentified individual claiming family connections raised my awareness level. But it wasn't until I received the update about the person's specific interest in Prince Louis that I became seriously concerned. The video showed the moment when James's demeanor changed from relaxed vigilance to active threat assessment. His body language shifted subtly, and he began positioning himself more defensively relative to Louis's location. "Your instincts were correct," Phillips confirmed. "Our investigation has revealed that Caldwell had been observing the garden party for over an hour before making his initial approach. He was gathering information about Prince Louis's activities and trying to determine the best moment to make contact." She switched to camera footage from earlier in the afternoon, showing a figure moving through the crowd of garden party guests. Even in the somewhat grainy video, it was clear that the person was focused intently on tracking Louis's movements rather than enjoying the festivities. "This is particularly troubling," Phillips continued, zooming in on the footage. "Notice how he's taking photographs with his phone, always angled toward Prince Louis. We've recovered his device, and it contains dozens of images from yesterday alone, plus hundreds more from other royal events over the past several months." James felt his stomach tighten as he watched the footage. The idea that someone had been stalking Louis for months, documenting his public appearances and studying his routines, was deeply disturbing. "How did he gain access to so many royal events?" James asked. "That's where the investigation becomes more complex," Phillips replied, her expression growing darker. "Caldwell didn't just attend random public events. He specifically targeted gatherings where Prince Louis would be present, and he demonstrated knowledge of scheduling details that should not have been publicly available." She opened another file containing what appeared to be a detailed calendar marked with royal family events. This was found in Caldwell's residence. Notice the level of detail, not just dates and locations, but specific timing for Prince Louis's appearances, information about security arrangements, and even details about which protection officers would be assigned to which events. The implications hit James like a physical blow. Someone provided him with inside information. "That's our working theory," Phillips confirmed grimly. "We're conducting a comprehensive investigation of everyone with access to detailed royal scheduling information. This includes household staff, security personnel, event coordinators, and administrative assistants. The thought that someone within their trusted circle might have betrayed that trust was almost as disturbing as the original threat." James found himself mentally reviewing everyone he worked with regularly, wondering who might have had both access to sensitive information and a motive for sharing it. "What about Caldwell's background?" James asked. "How did someone with no criminal history develop such an elaborate obsession?" Phillips opened another section of her files, revealing a complex psychological profile that had been compiled overnight by forensic psychiatrists. This is where the case becomes even more unusual. Caldwell appears to have developed what psychologists are calling a constructed identity delusion. He genuinely believed that he was a distant relative of Queen Camilla, and that this gave him legitimate access to the royal family. She displayed copies of the forged genealogical documents that Caldwell had created or obtained. The level of detail was extraordinary, including fabricated birth certificates, marriage records, and family trees that traced back several generations. "The forgeries are professional quality," Phillips noted. "Either Caldwell has skills and resources we haven't discovered, or he's working with others who provided these documents. We're investigating both possibilities." James studied the fraudulent papers, noting the official-looking seals and signatures. "How long would it take to create something like this?" "According to our document analysis experts, several months minimum, assuming access to high-quality printing equipment and genuine document samples to copy." This wasn't something that was put together quickly or carelessly. The scope of the deception was becoming clear to James. This hadn't been an impulsive act by a disturbed individual, but rather a carefully planned and executed scheme that had been months or possibly years in the making. "There's more," Phillips continued, displaying photographs from Caldwell's residence. "We found what can only be described as a shrine dedicated to Prince Louis specifically. Hundreds of photographs, newspaper clippings, and personal items that he claimed were gifts from various royal family members. The images showed a bedroom wall covered floor to ceiling with pictures of Louis at various royal events, school functions, and public appearances. In the center was a small table set up like an altar, with candles, flowers, and what appeared to be handwritten letters addressed to the young prince. The letters are particularly disturbing," Phillips noted. "They're written as if Caldwell was having ongoing correspondence with Prince Louis, describing family gatherings that never happened and making plans for future meetings." James felt sick looking at the evidence of such an elaborate fantasy. The level of obsession demonstrated by these displays was far beyond anything he had encountered in his security training. "What's his current status?" James asked. "He's undergoing comprehensive psychiatric evaluation at a secure facility," Phillips replied. "Initial assessments suggest possible schizophrenia with delusional features, but the forensic psychiatrists want more time to complete their evaluation. Given the premeditated nature of his actions and the sophistication of his planning, the legal system is treating this as a serious threat case." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the conference room door. An aide entered with an encrypted message for Commander Phillips, who read it quickly before looking up with a troubled expression. "We have a new development," she announced. "Caldwell's psychiatric evaluation has revealed that he believes there are others who share his family connection to the royal family. He's been referencing a group or network of people who he claims are also rightful relatives who deserve access to royal family members." This revelation changed everything. What they had initially treated as an isolated incident involving a single disturbed individual might actually be part of a larger conspiracy or organized threat. "Are we dealing with multiple suspects?" James asked. "Unknown at this time," Phillips replied. "Caldwell's statements are inconsistent, and it's unclear whether he's describing real people or additional delusions. However, we can't afford to assume this was an isolated incident." She activated her secure communication device to contact other members of the security team. "We're elevating this to a code red security assessment. All members of the royal family are being placed under enhanced protection protocols until we can determine the scope of any potential threat network." James realized that his role in protecting Louis was about to become significantly more challenging. If there were indeed other individuals with similar obsessions and access to inside information, every public appearance and even routine activities would need to be reassessed for security risks. "What does this mean for Prince Louis's immediate schedule?" James asked. "All public engagements are suspended pending completion of the threat assessment," Phillips replied. "We're also implementing new security measures for the royal residences and reviewing all staff access privileges." The weight of these developments was overwhelming. In less than 24 hours, they had gone from preparing for a pleasant garden party to uncovering what might be an organized conspiracy targeting the royal family, with Prince Louis as a specific focus. "There's one more thing," Phillips added, consulting her latest messages. "Caldwell has been asking specifically to speak with Prince Louis. He claims he has important family information that he needs to share with him personally." The audacity of this request was breathtaking, but it also suggested that Caldwell's delusions remained intact despite his detention and the revelation that his documentation was fraudulent. "Obviously, that's not happening," Phillips continued. "But his persistence suggests that his obsession hasn't been diminished by his arrest. We need to be prepared for the possibility that he might attempt to make contact again, or that others with similar fixations might see his arrest as an opportunity to take his place." As the briefing session concluded, James found himself facing a new reality. The casual, friendly relationship he had developed with Louis over the past 2 years would now need to be balanced with awareness that they might be dealing with ongoing, organized threats. The innocent world of carousel rides and garden parties had given way to something much darker and more complex. The protection of Prince Louis had become not just a matter of preventing opportunistic threats, but of defending against individuals or groups who had invested significant time, resources, and planning into gaining access to the young prince. The game had changed completely, and James knew that both he and Lewis would need to adapt to a new and more dangerous reality. 3 weeks after the garden party incident, Prince Louis stood at the tall windows of his private study room in Kensington Palace, watching the morning routine of his new security detail. Where once there had been 2 protection officers maintaining a discreet presence, there were now 4 guards visible in the courtyard below, with additional personnel stationed at points throughout the palace grounds that Louis couldn't see but knew were there. The young prince had adapted to these changes with the remarkable resilience that children often display. But Officer James Mitchell could see signs that the heightened security was affecting him in subtle ways. Louis asked fewer spontaneous questions about going outside, seemed more cautious around new people, and had developed a habit of checking to make sure James was nearby even during routine activities. "James," Louis said without turning from the window, "will there always be this many guards around now?" It was a question that James had been expecting, though he still hadn't settled on the perfect answer. In the weeks since the incident, the investigation had revealed increasingly complex details about Marcus Caldwell and potential connections to other individuals with unhealthy fixations on the royal family. The security protocols that had been implemented as temporary measures were beginning to look like permanent changes. "The security team wants to make sure you're as safe as possible," James replied carefully, joining Louis at the window. "Some of these changes might stay, but others might be adjusted as we learn more about how to keep everyone protected while still allowing you to do the things you enjoy." Louis nodded thoughtfully, a gesture that seemed far too mature for his 6 years. "Like how we practice fire drills at school, but we don't have fires every day?" "Exactly like that," James agreed, impressed as always by Louis's ability to find appropriate comparisons for complex situations. The comparison was more apt than Louis realized. The investigation into Caldwell had indeed revealed what Commander Phillips described as a network of concern, not a formal conspiracy but a loose collection of individuals who had developed similar obsessions with various members of the royal family, and had been sharing information and feeding each other's delusions through online forums and social media groups. The discovery of this network had prompted a comprehensive review of royal family security protocols. Intelligence analysts were working to identify and monitor other individuals who might pose similar threats, while cybersecurity experts were attempting to track and disrupt the online communities that had been facilitating these concerning behaviors. "Your Royal Highness," came a voice from the doorway. Mrs. Henderson, Louis's nanny, entered with her usual warm smile, though James noticed that she now wore a small communication device that kept her connected to the security team at all times. "Your mother would like to see you in the morning room when you're ready." Louis brightened immediately. The Princess of Wales had been making extra efforts to spend time with him in the weeks following the incident, recognizing that he needed additional reassurance and attention during this period of adjustment. As they walked through the palace corridors toward the morning room, James noted the subtle but significant changes that had been implemented throughout the royal residences. Additional security cameras, new access control systems, and strategically positioned security personnel created layers of protection that were largely invisible to casual observers, but represented a fundamental shift in how the royal family's daily lives were managed. "James," Louis said as they walked, "do you think the person who was at the garden party was really trying to hurt me?" It was a direct question that James had hoped to avoid, but Louis's perceptive nature made it impossible to deflect indefinitely. The young prince had clearly been thinking about the incident and trying to understand the motivations of the person who had pursued him. "I don't think he wanted to hurt you physically," James replied honestly, "but sometimes people become confused about appropriate ways to meet or interact with members of the royal family." His confusion made him behave in ways that were frightening and inappropriate. Louis considered this explanation as they continued walking. "Like when someone doesn't understand the rules of a game and plays wrong?" "Something like that," James agreed, though he knew that Caldwell's delusions were far more serious than simple rule confusion. The investigation had revealed that Caldwell genuinely believed he was entitled to a relationship with Prince Louis based on his fabricated family connections. Psychiatric evaluations had confirmed severe delusional disorder but had also uncovered a level of planning and organization that suggested his condition hadn't significantly impaired his ability to execute complex schemes. They reached the morning room to find the Princess of Wales reviewing what appeared to be architectural plans with several men in suits whom James didn't immediately recognize. The princess looked up as they entered, her face lighting up at the sight of her son. "Good morning, my darling," she said, setting aside her papers and opening her arms for Louis to run into her embrace. "How did you sleep?" "I dreamed about the night from the story James read to me," Louis replied, settling into his mother's lap despite being somewhat too large for such treatment. He was protecting a castle from people who wanted to visit but didn't know the proper way to ask. The princess exchanged a meaningful glance with James over Louis's head. Even in his dreams, the young prince was processing the events of recent weeks and trying to make sense of the complex security situation that now surrounded his daily life. "That sounds like a very wise knight," his mother replied gently. "What did he do to help those people learn the proper way?" "He taught them about manners and rules," Louis explained seriously, "and he made sure everyone was safe while they learned." The innocence of his interpretation was both touching and heartbreaking. Louis was trying to understand his situation through the lens of fairness and education, concepts that made sense in his 6-year-old worldview but didn't fully capture the reality of the threats they were dealing with. "Your Royal Highness," one of the men in suits said respectfully, "we were just reviewing some improvements to the security systems here at the palace. Would it be all right if we continued our discussion?" The princess nodded, though James could see her reluctance to have such conversations in Louis's presence. The challenge of balancing transparency with age-appropriate information was one that all of them were still navigating. "Louis," she said gently, "these gentlemen are helping us make sure that our home is as safe and comfortable as possible. They're like the people who make sure the lights work and the heating stays warm, except they focus on keeping unwelcome visitors from bothering us." Louis studied the architectural plans with intense curiosity. "Are you building new walls?" "Not exactly walls," one of the security consultants explained, "but we are adding some new features that will help us keep track of who comes and goes. Think of it like having better locks on the doors and windows." This explanation seemed to satisfy Louis, who had already learned to accept that his family's homes were different from those of ordinary people. The concept of enhanced locks and monitoring systems fit within his existing understanding of how royal residences functioned. James listened as the security consultants outlined their recommendations for upgrades to the palace's protection systems. The scope of the improvements was extensive, including enhanced perimeter monitoring, upgraded communication systems, and new protocols for managing visitor access. The cost, both financial and in terms of impact on the family's daily life, was significant. "What about outdoor activities?" the princess asked. "We can't keep Louis confined indoors indefinitely. He needs fresh air, exercise, and normal childhood experiences. We're developing new protocols for outdoor time," one consultant replied. "These include expanded advanced security sweeps, enhanced communication between protection officers, and modified procedures for any interactions with members of the public." The discussion continued for nearly an hour, covering everything from revised travel procedures to new protocols for educational activities. James found himself both impressed by the thoroughness of the security review and concerned about the impact these changes would have on Louis's quality of life. Throughout the conversation, Louis remained remarkably attentive, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated his understanding of the basic concepts being discussed. His questions were practical rather than fearful. He wanted to know if the changes would affect his ability to ride his bicycle, whether he would still be able to have friends visit, and if the new security measures would be in place for special events like birthdays. The important thing the princess emphasized repeatedly is that these changes help us feel safe while still allowing Louis to be a child. We're not trying to build a fortress, but rather a more secure environment that preserves normalcy wherever possible. This philosophy guided many of the decisions that were being made about Louis's future security arrangements. Rather than implementing maximum security measures that would effectively isolate him from normal experiences, the team was working to find a balance that provided adequate protection while maintaining quality of life. As the meeting concluded, James realized that his relationship with Louis was evolving in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. The casual friendliness they had shared was now complemented by a deeper sense of responsibility and awareness. Louis had come to rely on him not just as a protector, but as a source of stability and continuity during a period of significant change. "James," Louis said as the security consultants departed, "when everything is finished with the new safety things, will we be able to have another garden party?" The question went to the heart of what everyone was trying to achieve. The goal wasn't just to prevent future incidents like the one that had occurred 3 weeks earlier, but to restore Louis's confidence in normal activities and public events. "I think so, Your Royal Highness," James replied, though he knew that any future garden parties would involve significantly different security arrangements. "But it might be a little different from before." "Different how?" Louis asked. "Well, there might be more security people around to help keep everyone safe," James explained. "And we might need to be more careful about who gets invited. But the important parts, the carousel, the games, the treats, those could all be the same." This seemed to satisfy Louis, who had learned to accept that many aspects of his life involved more complexity and precaution than those of other children. The remarkable thing was how well he had adapted to these realities, without losing his essential optimism and curiosity about the world. Later that afternoon, as James watched Louis playing in his private garden under the watchful eyes of multiple security personnel, he reflected on how much had changed since that sunny morning 3 weeks earlier. The innocence of that garden party seemed like something from a different era, though in reality, only a brief time had passed. The investigation into Marcus Caldwell and his network of fellow obsessives was ongoing, with new developments emerging regularly. Some days brought reassuring news about the isolation of threats and the effectiveness of monitoring systems. Other days revealed new complexities and potential concerns that required additional security measures. Through it all, Louis continued to display the remarkable resilience and adaptability that had impressed James from their first meeting 2 years earlier. The young prince was learning to navigate a more complex and potentially dangerous world while maintaining his essential character and curiosity. It was a lesson in courage that James found himself learning as much from as teaching. The new normal they were creating together wasn't the carefree childhood that Louis might have had in different circumstances, but it was a life that balanced necessary precautions with genuine happiness and growth. And in James's experience, that balance, difficult as it was to achieve, was perhaps the greatest victory they could hope for in the face of the challenges that had emerged from that fateful afternoon at Windsor Castle.